Sound check, everybody chime in and let me know if my sound is okay. As you can see, we have jumped from back east to the west coast and it is super bright out here. We found the only shady spot. I've got like 2 feet of shade here. We're gonna try and keep the camera in the shade so that it does not overheat because it is hot out here. Starting out, we have our upcoming seminar on July 28th at FlowShala. That's coming up here in about 2 weeks. We are going to be using plain staffs, cold steel staffs, and baseball bats, and maces and clubs for that. That is upcoming, and we are setting dates for the next seminar. I believe it's September 22nd, but I have to confirm that with Summer Huntington of FlowShala because she is the keeper of the schedule for those seminars. And we are determining which week we would like a big 5-day seminar to be in Thailand, either the first or the second week of January 2023 at this very new, very cool facility that's being run by one of the ex-aerialists who used to come to my aerial studio back when it was open and before it was defunct. And so I think we're going to be one of the first seminars there. It has a giant aerial pagoda that was built in it. We won't be using that, but it's going to be pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about that. I've never been to Thailand. Don't really know anything about traveling there yet, but that's the point. We set seminars and places we like to go to because that's part of the fun. You get to go someplace to do it. And we're trying to work on the economics of it currently to make sure that it is affordable for people to go to. It will be expensive, but it will be affordable. We're going to try and keep it in line with seminars that are done in America. So we're trying to keep it in line price point wise. We're just working on all the numbers for that. Sound looks good. Okay. And Germany's already online. Hello, Germany. And apparently I do pronounce the German name correctly, the Brück correctly. I believe I'm saying that correctly. He says I'm saying it. Just don't roll the R too hard. We have somebody from India chiming in. 26, 6 foot tall, weighs 90 kilograms and started 14-10 intermittent fasting very recently. Can I start with a 14 kilogram kettlebell, and which kettlebell exercise would burn the most calories? Yeah, sure. You're 26, you're 6 foot tall. You can definitely start with a 14. You probably start with a 16 kilogram. 16, if you don't have a bunch of injuries, is normally where people start, but I highly recommend people start because of the availability of weights with 2K lower than they might need to. And there'll be a little bit of lead-in phase where you're learning, but if you don't have access to a qualified instructor to teach you live, then err on the side of being lighter instead of on the side of being heavier, because you will get more out of the training faster by having less negative to not doing everything correctly. The heavier the weight, the more the negative becomes if you're doing techniques improperly. For the most part, I am a big believer that people can self-coach if provided the necessary starting information. Obviously, I've made like 800 videos on the necessary starting information, but for the most part, people will benefit from starting a little bit lighter. Calories that are gonna burn the most calories. 14K, you're gonna start with your swing program because you start everything with your swing program. You're gonna start with 2-handed deadlifts, then you're gonna go to 2-handed swings, then you're gonna go to a 10-minute EMOM, then you're gonna start taking your numbers up. You're gonna start with low numbers once again, so that you are not so tired that your technique starts to fail. And if you do get tired, then you will not have a huge detriment to setting it down wrong or anything with the lightweight in the beginning. And then you're gonna start ramping up. After that, I believe the next most important thing that people should start is working on their clean and press. This is the order that I released my programs in: swings, clean and press, and start running the numbers for those and start running up. And then probably after that, run into Turkish get-ups and then deck squats. For the most part, getting a high calorie burn in the beginning is just working on your basic technique and doing more numbers every time that you work out. More reps, more breathing, more calorie burn. Basic equation, works out pretty simply. But yeah, you can totally start with a 14K. I recommend people start with light weights And I do believe you can self-coach by having a light enough weight that you can make errors without hurting yourself. The most important thing when starting is getting your clean into the right position. Your handle needs to be at that 45-degree angle across the hand so that your wrist can be flat. If you have a bent wrist or if you're using a barbell grip, it's going to be worse for you. I'm going to sneeze. Sorry. Am I going to sneeze? Oh, sorry guys, getting that motorcycle. The air out here is very different than it is in the Midwest, and every time I jump back and forth between the two places, and I ride my motorcycle a lot, which is how I get around LA, you get all that LA road grime in the nose, and you have to neti pot every day for a couple of weeks, but it kind of closes you up a little bit, or at least it does me. I've had injuries and infections in my skull, so I'm a little bit more susceptible to it than I probably should be. No, I'm not related to James McAvoy. No, that's hilarious though. Thomas Musley. Need some advice on things I can do when I mess up my lower and sometimes upper back. What exercises can I do with a hurt back? You're gonna have to be way more specific about what hurt back means. Normally hurt back is something in the hips not firing right or something in the core not firing right. If you have a hurt back, I can tell you to do everything that I do. I would just tell you to use light enough weights until you restore core function. The question is, when people say I have a hurt lower back, that's not enough information. Does that mean that your hamstrings are super tight? Does that mean that you don't rotate well? Does that mean you have no core firing? Does that mean you not have core endurance? Does that mean that you pushed your back too hard? Does that mean that you fell down? There's so many things that it could be that it's hard to answer that question. But for the most part, everything I do is about making sure that people's back fires correctly, that it works correctly. That's the most important thing. If the center of your body doesn't work, then nothing works. So swings, clean and press, Turkish get-ups, all the club stuff, inside circle, outside circle, shield cast, pendulums, mills, all of those are designed to restore core function and make lower back pain go away when they're done the correct way. Obviously, we talk about the math on how to do that all the time. How to do things correctly, starting with a lightweight, do volume cycles, move into density cycles, increase complexity over time, and allow your body hundreds of core firings every day to reestablish proper length tension relationship in your core so that you don't have a hurt back anymore. So that's the best answer I can give for the amount of information I had. Peter Brook, short R. What are your thoughts on Edo Portal and his method? We talked about this last time, at the end at like 90 minutes into a 2-hour one we did last week. I really like Edo Portal's movement. I am not a fan of the training methodology because the training methodology requires people to work out for an extremely long period daily, which is like 4 hours. And so it's not within the realm of what most people will have time for. You have to be in a professional or semi-professional athlete range in order to accomplish something like Edo Portal's style of training. I think it's very cool. I'm much a bigger fan of time-controlled stuff because I'm a normal guy. I've, normal person my entire life. I grew up on a dirt road. I lived on a horse farm. I worked my entire life. At no point in my life did I had time to do 4 hours of training on top of everything else that I did. At no point could I work a 12-hour shift doing roofing in 100-degree heat covered in black tar and come home and do 4 hours of something. That was just simply not feasible. Same thing if you're like construction worker or if you're baling hay. Like nobody has time that I know. I know a couple of like rich A-list actors who have that much time, but I don't know anybody else. So while I love Edo's movement stuff, I'm not a huge fan of the way that it is sold, but I believe that is the point. I believe the point of his training is to be exclusionary. It's to exclude people because he wants to get to the best possible people. And I operate the opposite of that. I don't want to go to the best people. I want to train everybody else in the world because that's 99% of everybody else in the world. And I think that 99% who only have 20 minutes a day are the people who really need my help. That's the way I organize my training. That's the way I will always organize my training. And we are coming up with some even shorter workouts. I'm working on a whole series right now of like 10 to 15 minute single kettlebell workouts. Very simple thing. I just did one an hour ago. I'm doing 2 of them a day right now to test them out. But I think that a 15-minute program, 30 minutes and under, is where 99.9% of the world can and will be for training. So Edo, great stuff, fantastic mover, far superior to me in every way. It's just different. It's different. Cycling specific kettlebell routines, Bren and metal spikes. Ironically, it's everything in kettlebells. I used to cycle a lot. Back in college, that was my primary means of transportation around Los Angeles. And as people who've lived in LA know, LA is not small. It is not a small city by any stretch of the imagination. It's 15 miles from downtown to Santa Monica. And further east than that, there's another 50 miles of stuff out there. So your average cycle ride to get around LA is far. I used to cycle every day around USC, and USC is big, and I lived off campus, of course. And then we would go to Hollywood, or we'd go to different training locations, and you'd easily ride 6 miles each way and train while you were there. So I'm a pretty big fan of cycling as just something that's good for you. It's an excellent way to get around. And I think almost everything in kettlebelling will prepare you better for cycling. Cycling is dominated by push and pull. If you're cycling just without clip-ins, without clip shoes, then you push the whole time, right? So you need push leg endurance. And you need core endurance. The thing that I think that most people fail at in cycling is probably core endurance, and everything in kettlebelling is cross-body stabilization core endurance. And every time you do a swing or a clean or a snatch, you extend the hips, which is a counterpoint to what you do in cycling, which is where you're in hip flexion for the most part. If you're using clips, if you're a really hardcore cyclist and you really want to get places, then you alternate between pushing on the crank and pulling on the crank. I once rode a bike from LA to San Francisco, which is, I don't know, hundreds of miles. And then I made my way across to Colorado to Central Valley. And then from Central Valley, I rode across the Front Range and across Kansas, which is not flat. I don't care what anybody says. And Kansas itself is just 400 miles. And I rode all the way into, God, what is that, Missouri? And I took a train all the way up to Minnesota. And then I did a bunch of riding there, and then I rode down. So I've covered thousands and thousands and thousands of miles on a bike, unsupported, which means carrying all your gear. Any kettlebell routine would support that. Could you get much more specific with it? Yes. But the question is, what are you training for? Are you training for triathlons? Are you training for pure cycling? Are you training for mountain biking? The general answer is everything in kettlebells solves cycling problems because it's all endurance based. So you learn to recover with weightlifting the same way you need to recover with cycling, which is without stopping. So they have similar effects on the body really well, because kettlebells, if you're doing them right, are all core, all glute if you're doing it right, and all hamstring. So you end up with all of the core musculature you need, and you can adjust your kettlebelling by weight and time and exercise in order to create different demands each day. Sorry. And that does build up to being much, much, much better at cycling. In the beginning, the problem that most people have with cycling is they simply cannot endure the unification of structure, breathing, and movement. And that is a problem for them in the long run. So kettlebelling solves those problems immediately and starts to build people up towards the muscle groups that they need, the breathing patterns that they need, and the core control that they need. So yeah, we could come up with a million specific cycling programs, and it would probably be things like static lunges, and think about static lunges and all the different ways you can load the core in order to create variation. Suitcase same side, suitcase opposite side, rack position, double rack position if you're really trying to get psychotic with it, overhead static lunges, and then you can build all those out into your stepping patterns. I think something like a hunter's squat kind of gives the closed hip flexion position that you need in order to build the strength for the type of push that you would need in cycling. But yeah, we can talk about that, goes on and on and on forever, but it gets a little bit more specific based on types of cycling that you're going to do. A lot of cycling trainers, cycling guys I know, like one of my buddies is a world-class triathlete, so he cycles all the time, and he does all of his cycling training by combinations of different types of lifting, endurance lifting, and then he does power output tests and power output days for cycling. Long distance days and pure power days where he measures watts and outputs per unit time. Fascinating stuff, but he's, world class. So his training, his cycling workouts are nuts. Here we have somebody clicking in from northern Minnesota. Hello, Minnesota. White Bear Lake up there, beautiful place. When doing a heavy day, this is from Jeremy Mick Mahan. When doing a heavy day, God, I'm not getting this, can't read this well. When we're doing a heavy and a light day with a single arm club, what weight difference do you recommend between the light and heavy days? Probably 5 pounds. For the most part, 5 pounds is plenty for most people. That's the way we all used to have to do it before the advent of 8X, AddX club system. I call it 8X because it sounds fun. It's really AddX because you're... it could be 2.5 pounds if you have an adjustable club. Most clubs come in that 5 pound jump, and that's the way you have to do it. More than 5 pounds is too much traction grip for most people. Yeah, people can hold on to a traction grip. That means something that's pulling through your hand with a heavy weight for a small number of reps. Everything that I do and I advocate for in single arm heavy club swinging is building up towards the volume cycle and the density cycle. Half century would be 50 total reps on each side. Full century would be 100 total reps on each side. I think that the benefit starts to go down after full century. And usually I run cycles like that till we get to about 10 sets of 10. And then I usually jump weight, because that's the best way to get the most in the least period of time, is to jump through programs and go up in weight and alternate between the heavy and light with a 5 pound weight difference. If there's a better way to get more out of single arm clubbing faster, I have no idea what it is, and I have been dedicated looking for about 10 years. There's a lot of other methods, but things like time under tension for single arm requires you to already be very strong in order to pull it off. So I don't talk about single arm time under tension programs all that much. I leave that into the realm of two-handed club training. Two-handed club training, because you have 2 hands. You can cycle the load on your hands by adjusting your hands with heavy sets. And you can work on your total global strength better with two-handed club training. Single arm club training, I have a very specific way that I do it, and everything I do focuses on the mill and the reverse mill as being the end point goal. And that's intermediate complexity, right? We go through the basics, we get to intermediate complexity, mill and reverse mill, and then eventually we move on beyond that to stepping patterns and everything else. But for the most part, 90% of the population is going to do light, heavy days with a 5 or 2.5 pound jump, and they're going to run their basics and they're going to ram up in weight until guys get to 30, ladies 17.5 to 20, depending on frame size. Let's look for another question. Carl Elijah, yeah. Mark, I own both TacFit knurled handled clubs and smooth handled ones. Which one do you prefer? The knurled ones do weird things to my kettlebell calluses and cause early fatigue. That's a good question. I use both. I I don't know if TacFit clubs, there were TacFit clubs that were made in Europe and they were a smoother handle. I believe they were solid metal. And then there were the RMAX original clubs, which I think might have been renamed the TacFit club now. I don't remember. Somebody asked me that the other week and I meant to look it up, but I didn't. And depending on the year, the amount of knurling on those handles varied greatly by manufacturing capacity. So I have some that are very lightly knurled, which I prefer less, and there are some that are too sharp to hold, which cut your hands up pretty well. And then there were a couple of years where they just had perfect handles. They're magnificent. I still refer to the RMAX International Heavy Club, Club Bell, as the Cadillac or the Ferrari of the club training world. The 8X is really like the workhorse of the club training world. Which one do I prefer? I've used both for so long, but I used to love the handles. I think there were some really good years like 2014, 2015 when I got some RMAX 35s with knurling that were just incredible. I liked them so much that I cut them apart and I made custom 30s and 40s and 50s and 55s and 60s out of them. Just because I wanted to replicate that handle. And I have some metal guys out here in the special effects who can replicate that very well, but for the most part, people don't have that capacity. Knurling or smooth. I like something with texture. I don't like a glass smooth handle. I've had some glass smooth handles and they are impossible to use. I would rather suffer through too much knurling than not enough traction. So some clubs have knurling, some clubs have heavy texture paint, which I've grown to like quite a bit. But yeah, it's up to you. I do not like a smooth handle at all. You simply cannot hold on to them. There's no place for the sweat in your hand to go when you're swinging for long sets with that. If you're only doing time under tension, 30 seconds of work, 30 seconds of break, then it's doable. I had some really glass smooth ones from like Apollo Athletics that I bought in Canada when I was there on a movie in like 2015, like a 50 of 55. And they were so smooth that they were basically useless. I ended up taking them and sanding all of the paint and a finishing off of them and just scratching the shit out of them with like abrasion disc to try to create some type of traction on them, to try to make them useful in any way because they were very expensive. There are a lot of club companies out there that make just absolutely terrible clubs. There's a lot less now, and the overall design of heavy clubs has gotten way better. The Club Bell was the original and the best. The On-It ones are pretty good, although being much shorter, they have a much different leverage arm output. But they have a smooth handle, but it has a dusky finish on it, which is actually not too bad if you already know what you're doing. If you don't already know what you're doing, then less good. But if you're already good, then it's not bad. Oh, somebody donated money. Thanks, guys. Oh, guys, you love it. Let's find another one. Let's go back to that, Cal, because you say that it's doing weird things to your kettlebell calluses and causing early grip fatigue. Yes, this is an issue. Training, you can usually get away with training heavy kettlebell and medium club, or heavy club and medium kettlebell, but it's really hard to do both heavy club for single hand stuff and heavy kettlebell single hand stuff. You run into not enough skin on your hands, and when your grip gets tired, which it does when you're really trying to push the weight, your technique starts to fall apart in your hands and you start to really thrash them. I mean, you can see I have permanent calluses here. This is my club callus, and these up here are my kettlebell calluses. And my hands go back and forth between being either absolutely annihilated or not bad. Now that I don't do aerial anymore because I don't have an aerial studio, my hands are a lot better, and I can get a lot more out of both clubbing and kettlebelling. Because I used to kettlebell, club, and do aerial, and aerial is just absolutely savage on the hand. It's worse than everything else as far as I can tell. You're not going to lose as much skin, but you're going to lose skin in a different way, which is pretty terrible. So normally, the point of balancing all the programs is that single arm club tends to stay lightweight for a long time. Kettlebells tends to go up in weight faster. Time under tension two-hand club tends to be a different enough type of load on the hand that you can get away with doing it that way. So a classic thing that I always did with actors or people in Hollywood was 2 days of pure kettlebell, 2 days of two-handed club, and 2 days of single-hand club. And then throw in other skill development stuff like jumping over rails or whatever when you have downtime, if one of those programs is short one day. But yeah, I prefer some traction on a club, and yes, they will beat up your hands, and you're gonna have to learn to adapt to it. The main thing that people have is that there are a lot of very, very strong people out there who are well-trained athletes, but who never put themselves under this much hand stress before. And everything I do is tons of hand stress because cool stuff is really tons of hand stress. So a lot of problem that people have is that they are more muscular than their skin can stand up to. So a lot of the point of the way that we do our training is to allow the skin, which is an organ, to develop a new level of toughness to survive over time. My hands are way better now. For the first 5 years, my hands were thrashed all the time because I was trying to do trapeze and super heavy kettlebell, and it was not a good combination. It really ate my hands up, and my hands were constantly bleeding. So you guys get the benefit of lots of my training where you don't have to accidentally repeat all these horrible things that I did to myself in my youth. Timothy Switer, in his swing and clean and press workouts, a couple of times he gets pain and feels like it goes from my ear down the side of the neck. It sticks around for a couple of days and must be moving head, not eyes. Yeah, for the most part, sometimes people look away when they do their kettlebells in the beginning, and if they don't have mobility properly in their upper neck, then they can get a big knot. I get one sometimes that runs into the back of my skull, and if I crush it either with like a small spiky physio ball, like a 2-inch physio ball, lay on it and let it hold for 2 minutes and let it slide down. But also a lot of people who live in the modern world have deviated posture from years of, doing computer stuff or being on their phone. And some people might need to go seek out something like a body worker to find out how many knots are up in here. There are ways you can do it. There's tons of things you can look up with different types of crush balls, physio balls to work on the neck. But usually that comes from people having like a knot or an adhesion either in the connection at the base of the skull, in the muscle of their neck, or down here where it connects into the top of their shoulder. And that gets knotted up, and then they push it too far, and then their grip starts to get tired, and then they start to retract their shoulder, and it gets a little bit tighter, and then it starts to kick off. Usually if you're swinging weight, that is an issue as you're going up in weight. If they lose control a little bit, then it tends to pull on that shoulder, and they try to retract it, and it just causes a knot. Usually the cures are body work and crushing it in some way with a physio ball. There's tons of techniques for that. You can look them all up. For the most part, get down on the ground, put a ball on the ground, figure out how to lay on it, and then figure out how to put more load on it by elevating your hips or something like that. Hold for 2 minutes, move it an inch, hold for 2 minutes, move it an inch, hold for 2 minutes, move it an inch. I try not to go above, say, 6 minutes when I have something like that, because you're just going to make it more mad than it was already. But yeah, that is something that happens. People will also get them in where all these muscles come together, or the triple warmer in their arm. When they start to get tired, they will start to micro bend their arm, and they will get big tension pulls here from micro bending their arm, or from their arm not straightening all the way from doing too many bicep curls. And then sometimes this one will lead to a knot in the pec up here, and then that will have to be crushed out as well. Whoa, what happened to my gimbal there? Sorry guys, let's try and refire up that gimbal. Get it to There we go. It's not straight. I got to recalibrate this gimbal. It's killing me. Jerry Heath popped his wrist doing two-hand club last night. It doesn't hurt, but it felt weird. When you pop your wrist, that's a question. Does that mean like in the top here? Sometimes people will get an adjustment here, but for the most part, go down and wait for a little while and probably work on single arm. One of the wrists might not be working like the other wrist, and that tends to be a problem. The whole point of single arm club is to make sure that the joints on both sides of the body work equally well and have an equal amount of traction strength. So practicing your single arm can help people very much get better at their two-hand, because if people just do two-hand, they will default to having about 60% of the load on their strong side, even when you change top and bottom hands. Everything we do is a giant trick to try to get people to balance out the movement patterns of their body in the most basic ways first, standing all the way up before we start adding tons of complexity. You will see a lot of people who add a lot of complexity to something like mace flow, but you can tell that their left arm doesn't work the same as their right arm, and they can get away with it because they're doing light weights, but then they can't go up in weight and survive the training because they didn't spend enough time doing those tens of thousands of reps to balance out the left and the right side of their body. Balance is the key thing to staying healthy in the long term. One good side will eventually overuse. Having both sides work equally well and have an equal range of movement and an equal strength level is probably the most important thing you can do for your long-term health and longevity. Let's scroll back here a little bit. We kind of skipped to the bottom there. How to pick a band for assisted pull-ups. Ooh, that's a good one. That would be a great video, but Gambate Fitness, where I normally shoot videos like that out here, is closed for the week for filming. We're shooting something in there, no clue what it is, but I can't get in there. But that's a good idea. Usually you start with the heaviest one you can find. For the most part, if you can't do pull-ups, start with a thick band. And you have your red band, your black bands, and purple band? Depends on where you're at in the world, I guess. Start with the thicker band and start doing your pull-ups, because once again, you're trying to gather reps. You're trying to gather experience points. If you're doing banded pull-ups, you can do your banded pull-ups. One of the great things you can do is you can combine something like static holds with banded pull-ups. So you can go down to the bottom, reach your full extension, straighten your arms out all the way, no bent elbow pull-ups. Not for me, not ever, due to trapeze. There's no bent arm pull-ups in trapeze. Full range of movement, and then pull to the top and then hold. 1,000, 2, 1,000, come down. Run a volume cycle, and then get a thinner band. Do the same thing. Hold that 2 seconds at the top, that contraction, 1,000, 2, 1,000, come all the way back down. It's kind of a fun way that sometimes you'll do it to combine just pull-ups with that isolated contraction at the top, which is what a lot of people are missing when they're doing pull-ups. So you're kind of combining two drills together with that idea, but it is a fun way to do them. It's also super annoying, and it gets super old very fast. Hello from Ukraine. Good question from Ukraine. STS, kettlebell deadlift with jump back plank. One hand. Is it doable? Totally. I was actually had that on the list of things to do. I just had a shooting location last night and I got thrown out of it. Problem. Because I was apparently too close to a dangerous edge or something. Stuff I don't care about, heights, or being too close to the edge after being a roofer. Yes, 100%. Deadlift, you can do a whole combination of super fun stuff. Deadlift, get down to the ground. Oftentimes, one of the fun things to do is tip the kettlebell with the handle towards you. Put your hand on top of the bell, so you're like doing almost like a tiger grip on the bell, and then doing your jump back plank from there, or then doing switch push-ups from side to side. All super fun stuff to do. But oftentimes you will lay the kettlebell down with the handle on the ground so that it's slightly more stable. You can do it with your hand directly on top of the handle. It's just going to turn your jump back plank very heavy to one side, which is also fine as long as you don't snap the bell over and crush your knuckles. Crushing your knuckles, never a good idea. It just takes away from training in the future or from training tomorrow. But yes, there's a whole series of videos. Maybe I should push that up today. I'm supposed to shoot videos after this. Maybe I should push that up, like the body weight man maker, and then just pure man maker. Did I already make the pure man maker video? Can't remember, have to look. And then single arm man maker, which is, once again, totally doable. Yes, you can do it. You can totally do it, and it is fun. It just requires you to be slightly more controlled with your movement and where you put your hands so that you don't end up smacking your knuckles or crushing your hand or anything like that. Tesla bot official. Heavy light question. Do I have to keep the heavy light version of an exercise the same? Can I, for instance, do light hand-to-hand swings and heavy two-hand swings? Absolutely. Absolutely. You do not have to keep your light heavy the same. You can keep it in the, I like to keep it in the same theme, swings, light, heavy. But I do like to vary complexity. You can get away with your hand-to-hand swings with a lighter weight much easier and go back to your two-handed heavy for just the pure hip snap power. So yes, once again, you can completely jump back and forth between levels of complexity within the same family of movement for light heavy. Absolutely. Same thing true with single arm club. You know, your heavy day is your basic. It's your single arm inside circle, your outside circle, your shield cast, and your light day could be inside pendulum, outside pendulum, alt 180 pullover. That way you're getting the benefit of single arm club. You're doing two different types of movements, basic movements. So you're feeding the different levels of complexity, feed the same movement patterns, and you get to save your hands a little bit. So 100%, absolutely, that is how it should be done. Jan Plan. How do you calculate the drop in weight and or intensity when you can't complete a workout? After dropping weight, intensity sets already. You don't. You keep going down until you can find a place to calculate to finish your workout. You could calculate where you ended your workout, but you can't calculate, it's just not meeting the total goal for the day. If you don't meet the total goal for the day, you could still record your work capacity and your load for the day, but it's not a completed workout. So go back down in weight or drop a level of complexity and rebuild. If somebody fails at something, back when I would train them, my goal was to make sure that they almost never failed, because it's not good for people psychologically to fail. I jump between heavy and light to keep people being successful every day. When you're doing the light day, it seems easy because it's not the heavy day. And when you're doing the heavy day, it seems easy because it's an easier level of complexity. That's a trick. But if people fail, I would usually just jump them to a new program. Instead of hammering something that they had just failed at, I will jump complexity, start a new level of complexity at a new volume cycle, and give them something that they can start over and have a lower total work capacity and rebuild the thing that failed. If it's in single arm club, it would be grip. So every time I start a new level of complexity, the number drops way down, their hand gets a chance to rest, and you go up a level of complexity so that the brain, when you go back to the thing that they failed at, thinks that it's easier now. It's all a series of tricks to keep people always going forward so that they can always get to where they need to be. But if anything fails, I jump program. I jump program, and then I come back to that program in a month or two after they've completed something else and let them hammer right through it. And they don't even notice then that that was what they had failed at. They don't remember, and because it's been so long and they've worked on something else entirely, They just don't know. They come back through and I'll make a note, didn't fail, didn't even notice that they did it, like all that stuff. That's one of the things you do with like actors and stuff. You're always working to make sure that they are accomplishing their tasks and going up in weight. Psychologically, it's just better for everybody if people are constantly succeeding. Is 8X still out of stock? Somebody says it's still out of stock. Yeah, I mean, people bought it up. They're ramping up production now, but yes, I am told by August sometime that there will be a whole new series of stuff out. What's the best way to recover from shoulder pain discomfort in your opinion? Sometimes when I clean and press, I feel a slight pinch in the front of my shoulder. I'm going to say single arm club, but that's my answer for everything, guys. The whole point of shoulder pain and discomfort is just like when you go to rehab, they have you do a series of band exercises, external rotation of the shoulder, internal rotation of the shoulder, all these different moves. And if you just do single arm club and you start at the beginning and you run up, you will do all of shoulder therapy, all of it on accident, but you're also tying it to a real skill and real weightlifting. So you're not just doing your rehab, you're going up in weight. If you have shoulder pain in the front of your shoulder, does that mean like out here in the front of the shoulders? Does that mean connected to the pec? That might mean you need to do something like puppy dog stretch to open up your shoulders. It might mean you need to crush it using a physio ball. It might mean you've done a lot of bench in your life. There's a ton of things that can mean, and without seeing it, it's very hard to tell. All right, let's find another good one here. What's the best way to send videos of monster lifts we've created? Great, love it. Just tag me on Instagram. Yeah, once people do a bunch of basics, I highly encourage everybody to start working on writing your own different types of training. And there's so many different types of training within kettlebelling. For like 2 years there, I was doing just time under tension with 1 minute or 90-second sets, and I was doing evolving levels of complexity up. The last month, I've been working in like endurance monster lifts. Monster lifts tend to be like 2 or more, like 3 or more basic moves shoved into a series, which is kind of what I think of as monster lifts. And then what I've been doing right now, sorry, ghetto birds going overhead here. I don't know if you guys can hear that or not. I can hear it. Where I've been combining basic movements with different timing protocols and trying to find ones that I think are doable for people at an intermediate level of kettlebell athleticism in order to work on 10 to 15-minute nonstop workouts. This came from somebody asked me a question, I can't remember if it was in comment section or here, where they wanted to know the minimum amount of work you could do in order to develop. And a minute, you can do a minute of swings and develop 5 times a day. But he wanted to know if he could do 5 or 6 minutes. And so I started thinking about that, and I was like, oh, we just write a bunch of 5-minute workouts. But then I wanted to, yes, ghetto birds. That's what we used to call them at USC because they went over USC all the time. USC is right on the edge of South Central. So once you cross what they call the Wall of Troy at Exposition Park, there are a lot of helicopters out in that area. So that's what we always called them. I don't know if that's PC anymore or whatever, but that's what it's called all of LA. Everybody in LA calls it that as far as I know. I don't know anybody who doesn't call them that. Back to design protocol. You can do 5-minute workouts. So a gentleman asked me if you could do 5 or 6 minute workouts. Absolutely, you can definitely do 5 or 6 minute workouts. If it's not working, it's not heavy enough. But if you lift 100 pounds nonstop, If you do 20 reps a minute for 5 minutes, that would be 100 reps. You could power clean for 5 minutes straight and have it be a usable, awesome form of training. Kettlebells are a little bit easier than that because they're easier to travel around than a 7-foot barbell. But yeah, you can do cleans nonstop for 5 minutes. You can do snatches nonstop for 5 minutes. I mean, there's some kettlebell competitions where I think that the time frame is just like one arm long cycle for 4 minutes. I watched one yesterday, some people in Europe, and it was some ladies putting up some crazy numbers, like crazy numbers. I think 30, 28, and 30K maybe, 4 minutes, and sticking into that 13 reps per minute range. Like, that is a brutal, savage workout. I've been writing some like 10 to 15 minute workouts because I'm trying to replicate the amount of time of a 2-mile run. So 7.5 minute mile times 2 minute run, 15 minutes, but all done in a small space that's portable so that people can work on those time frames for endurance but have it all be in a very small space that you can do in an apartment or on a deck or on a roof or anything. And I was working on those, the 15-minute one. I was combining that idea of the 5 to 6 minute useful time frame with somebody had sent me a comment about time frames, running tests for military or whatever. So I was like, oh, well, we'll write some that's somewhere in between those ideas. Get to that 15-minute non-stop, don't put the weight down, and then play with the basics and then adjust the numbers to make sure that it's doable. And then if you have a competition adjustable kettlebell, you could run those forever. I'm gonna try and shoot a bunch of those next week out in the desert, but I think I'm off topic here. But yes, there's all kinds of fun stuff you can do. Floyd Parker, have I ever read Gymnastics by FlowShala? My Greek pronunciation is terrible. 2nd century AD text on athletic training. I think you might find it interesting. I have not, but if somebody will write that in the comments after this video or write it down for me, I will see if I can find it. The last thing I was trying to find a copy of was the 1848 U.S. Cavalry Manual. Really hard to find. I wanted a paper copy of that so I could sit down and read about like that. But I do love reading these weird historical texts. I just haven't had a lot of time since COVID in the last 2 years because I'm constantly producing stuff. But I do love it when people give me things like that to read because there is a lot of interesting stuff in there. Some of the weirdest, most outsider fun stuff that I ever read was like some weird Chinese translations of books on Shaolin training from like 1,000 years ago. I used to have a whole set of them, and they were like 300 pages each, and I think I had like 7 of them. And they just detailed movement patterns and all these other things in like a very not great translation, but with like original illustrations transposed into a new printable format. And you have to like really think about that stuff. It's the same way that like historical European martial arts guys used text from like the 15th century or the 16th century to kind of recreate the knowledge that was being passed down from these different arts. There are a lot of cool books out there, but I would love to read that. If somebody can recommend a translation or a source to get that, then sure, I'd love to read stuff like that. There's good ideas are not limited to now. We have the internet now, but back in the day, I think it was much more important for people to be physically fit than it probably is now. Like, we live in the modern world. For the most part, we're not being jumped by highwaymen on the street who are armed with rocks and are going to kill us, or spears, or we're not going to meet Mongols on the plains or anything like that. So I think that we're much safer now, but like running as escape and evasion used to be super duper important. And all the things people did to train to be able to survive the world for all of human history is all information that we should be looking at and pulling from. There is a really good, fun source on Instagram called Wild Hunt Conditioning. And this guy reads all kinds of old stuff. And I like talking to him because we know a lot of the same weird stuff about history. But he posts like little series on history on like gladiator training, or like, I think the last one I read was gladiator training, but all about the basic ideas of like what did they break down in their version of Herbertism. The gladiator one was really cool because it was like one of the main things that they had them doing for training was digging and digging for speed, which I thought was interesting, which is really hard for people to do now because most people don't live in a place where they can just dig a hole, fill it in, dig a hole, fill it in, dig a hole, fill it in. But in the ancient world, that would have been something that would have been a very standard level of work capacity. Our stuff now is mostly, around lifting objects, lifting and carrying objects. But back in the day, like Roman soldier training would have been very heavily based on digging because they built a fort every time they stopped. Every time that they stopped for the night, they would build and erect a fort of a specific size in a square with trench and earthen wall. And so after they had marched all day, they would have to dig trenches and build up an earthen wall every night. So things like that are very important in the ancient world that are less important now, but are still super fun to think about and talk about. In our form of training, we would probably replicate things like digging training with mace training, which is not exactly the same thing, but it is the same movement patterns when done outside the line of the foot. But you can turn that, it's not the same, but it is the same movement pattern. Do I know of any heavy club coaches in New Zealand? I actually don't know of a single one. The population of New Zealand is not that big, is it? What is it, like 6 million? There's got to be somebody down there doing it, but I just don't know of any. Nobody's come across my feed yet. I know of some in Australia, some good ones in Australia. I mean, they're all over the place. They just tend to be in more outsider places because people who tend to end up training with clubs tend to be people who don't have access to all the normal gym stuff, and that's why they got into it. Safest kettlebell movement to guard against low back injury. Clean and press. That's from Random Puppies 789. The safest kettlebell movement to protect against low back injury. For the most part, low back injury is very misunderstood. Low back injury tends to be a weakness or a lack of connection between the upper back, the mid back, and the glutes and the hip function. So usually when people want to work on low back injury, you are looking for something specifically that makes the glutes and the low back fire. And if you can get it with some type of cross-body stabilization, that is how you rebuild people's lower back. I don't believe this whole I have a naturally bad back thing. That is something that has come from lifestyle or lack of training. Humans are all anatomically basically the same, right? We all have the same number of muscles and bones. They all go to this same general spot in the infinite variability of the human form, but it's not different. Yeah, and so low back pain tends to be something somewhere has gotten out of phase with all the other muscles in the core, and so you need to have something that reintegrates all the movement of the core in the standing position, usually with weight, because that's what we're concerned with. Pilates was a way to try to start reintegrating movement patterns, right? So Joseph Pilates was there in the turn of the 1800s into the early 1900s, and he invented as a way to train people who couldn't stand up yet to strengthen their core. So it was a post-World War II rehab thing. Soldiers coming back from World War I, coming back from World War I and being bedridden and then being too weak to do standing exercise. He invented Pilates to do that. But Pilates is something like that as a stopgap measure to get people back to standing. That's what people have forgotten about Pilates. They try to turn Pilates into a pure athletic training system. It is not. It has always been prehab or rehab. And ballet dancers have picked up on it because they do standing stuff the rest of the time. They have their bar work and their floor work, and then Pilates helps them re-isolate parts of their movement that they are training around, because ballerinas never quit. So anything with low back, everything in kettlebells will fix it, but I think clean and press is probably one of the best ones because it forces people to stand all the way up and try to drive their hips forward. A lot of people would say swings, but if you're doing swings with your hips in the wrong spot, single arm kettlebell has cross from the shoulder to the hip. It works front to back. It has glute squeeze in it. It has shoulder in it. It tends to work out the most problems in the least amount of time for something like low back pain. Ryan Miller loves the channel. Might be a non-responder for mobility. No matter what I do, it doesn't improve. Do you think it could be something nutritionally, hydration, or just not in the cards? That's an excellent question. I think that there is a minimum level of mobility that people need, but I think that it needs to be based eventually on replicating movement patterns. So when we think about something like mobility, we oftentimes do mobility as a check-in, like at the beginning of a workout. You're trying to move all of your joints, or the most useful joints, in all the directions. But sometimes people don't respond to it because they have like series of adhesions in their muscles where they are so adapted to certain positions that just basic mobility won't get them through it. I know a lot of people say that if you just do mobility forever, it'll eventually improve, but they never say how much it will improve. And that's true because nobody knows how much it will improve. Sometimes taking something like mobility training and then putting it into a specific context is how people get more out of mobility training. So I have bodyweight programs coming out. We have the first one, Bodyweight 101, has some basic loaded bodyweight. It's mobility training done its time under tension. And then when Krav 1 comes out next week or whatever, you will start taking some of that mobility and putting it in a specific context. When you put something in a specific context or you give it an end goal, the body tends to respond better to it. So some people might have adhesions that need to be got out through either go to body work if they can't get to all the knots or they can't find all the adhesions themselves. Then taking that mobility training from just warm up and putting it into the context of athletic training so that there is a specific end goal or end range that they need to meet. And then we got to figure out like how much mobility do you really need in order to be able to accomplish your goals in life. Like I used to be way more mobile because I used to do aerial all the time. So you got strong and you did aerial, and then you got the mobility you needed to pull off the tricks by hanging out in these horrible stretched positions for 10 to 30 seconds at a time, and then repeating that process over and over and over again. So I'm not quite sure what non-responder means. Does that mean your neck doesn't work? Does that mean your shoulder doesn't work? That might mean that you just need to add more time to your cool down at the end of training and start pushing your time frames up toward 3 minutes. Give yourself even longer to settle into some of these mobility-based positions. Damian Sands, what advice would you give regarding a program involving pull-ups, dips, kettlebells, and clubs? I would think that would be an excellent program, and it's fantastic. Pull-ups, full range of movement of the shoulder. Pull-ups are infinitely variable, right? You can take pull-ups and you can go the bar path and work it in towards muscle-ups, or you can take the trapeze path and turn it into pullovers and that infinite level of complexity. Dips, a lot of the equipment doesn't really exist to support like what I want to see in dips. But dips, once again, you can work on dips, you can work on Russian dips, you can work on bar dips, you can work on kettlebell hanging off your toe dips, and you can link those two together to get into the muscle up pattern, kettlebells and clubs. So what do you have? You have body weight push, you have body weight pull, also combined with a climb. And kettlebells, you have lifting, carrying, and all your basic fundamental movements. And then clubs, you have all of your basics of throwing patterns. I think that you have a nearly perfect program depending on what you're doing with it. And you have an almost infinite level of complexity that you could run up through. I would say something like, pull-ups twice a week. Or heavy light pull-ups 4 days a week. Heavy pull-ups being weighted, light being body weight. Same thing for dips, 2 days a week. Or if you're doing a heavy light, have 4 days a week. Kettlebells, you could throw almost any type of kettlebell training in on that and have it be effective, and almost any type of club training and be effective. So I think that that's an excellent layout, and I think that that's the way that like military guys should be leaning their training, would be the pull-ups, the dips, the kettlebells, and the clubs. Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. I love it. Do you do 5 reps by 5 sets with a club? Do you switch hand through all 5 sets, or do you put down the club in between each set? 80 answers to that question. If you're going to do 5 sets of 5, your 5 sets of 5 would need to be 5 left, 5 right. So it would really be 10 if you're not putting it down in between. That entirely has to do with weight. I don't think you really need to do something like that until you get north of the 50-pound range of clubs. Otherwise, you're just not getting what you could get out of clubs by pushing the reps or the weights higher. Above 50 pounds for men, I do think that you can get into the 5 sets of 5 range. I don't, but I do think that that's valuable if you have access to some of those like Great Lakes Jira, the 70, and I think they have an 85 and 100. I think that those are the weights where 5 sets of 5 would be really appropriate. And yeah, then you're turning it into pure strength training. Then you would set it down in between. And so you might set a 3-minute round, do your 5 reps, set it down, have a 2.5-minute break. But you have to have very heavy weights to make something like 5 sets of 5 purely necessary with clubs. What's more important for hypermobile shoulders? Scap or rotator cuff focused exercises? Andrew Gallegos. That's a question based on outcome. Some people like hypermobile shoulders, like aerialists love them, right? That's how they do most of their tricks. So I don't know what hypermobile means, but yeah, I'm not quite sure how to answer that question without understanding what hypermobile means. Does that mean hypermobile in extension? Does that mean that it's also thoracic hypermobility? Does that mean that the spine is super stable but the shoulder is super loose? If that was it, then I would say single arm club because it balances the whole shoulder. But probably with scapular retraction exercises thrown in on top of that. So hanging scapular retraction or push-up scap retraction focused with clubs. But that's the most general answer I can give for hypermobile shoulders. I should look into Patreon or YouTube member program. I'll have to look those up. I don't really know much about those. This guy, Noah Larch, is listening while doing Rite of Passage Variety Day. Is that from RKC? Is that strong first? Bottoms up press and single arm swings with a dish towel on the handle. That is hard. So there is a way that you can make kettlebells pull through your grip, and I don't talk about it a lot because I just don't talk about it a lot. Where you do your kettlebell swings, but you loop, say, a dish towel through it, so you're holding, instead of pulling against the grip, you're pulling through the grip. But it makes essentially a very heavy, short weight club with a loose handle. So oftentimes, single arm swings between the legs are not super effective with heavy clubs because as they get heavier, they tend to get longer. So that is a good thing that people do. And I will have people who are training for aerial or something do swings like that or do drills like that in order to prep for that tractionary grip. But yeah, very cool. I don't know who does that Variety Day, but it sounds like an RKC thing. That sounds like a Pavel thing. He was always a huge proponent of the bottoms up press back in the day. This for 3 weeks now. Huge difference in hip function. Summer Huntington is all about shin boxes. She does these modifications with mace and yoga, which is excellent. Yes, shin box is probably the level of mobility that most people need in their hips. Most people don't need to do a full Van Damme side split, but everybody should be able to do a shin box. And it tends to start with our basic hip mobility series, which would be windshield wiper, one hip moving, one hip staying up, then shin box with hands pointed back, then lean forward shin box. Then you can either from there go into shin box hip extensions, or you can jump to loaded. Usually shin box hip extension tends to work best first. And then you can add kettlebells. You can add kettlebells or clubs in the order position, 2 hands in front of you, because that still allows you some variation in the movement of your spine. And then getting in shin box and practicing front press with clubs or maces in the shin box will drive your hip back, and it's a loaded stretch. That's one of the things that we do to help people get over mobility restrictions is we put them in position, we load it, and then we have the load move with the base staying stable. And then you can do all of that stuff. That all builds into what I call versions of gun get-ups, right? 5 versions of gun get-ups. Getting up, chest down, getting up, back on the ground, getting up from the left, getting up from the right, and getting up through shin box with hands on club or mace so that you would be in a pistol presentation position from modern martial arts. But yeah, shin box series is incredible, and most people will need to get into that eventually. The loaded part usually comes in after month 6 or after a year, when people are really settled into it and they're used to it and they've already done a bunch of other kettlebelling and clubbing so that their muscles can endure and not snap if they try to load it too hard. Do you know how to flex your calves? Yes. I don't know what that's about. Yeah, I'm pretty sure everybody, I mean, not everybody knows how to do that, but yes. Do you count transition in single hand club as a rep? Excellent question. No. The answer is no. You should be doing in single arm club, you should be doing, if you're doing 5 reps, you're really doing 5.5 reps. And that's how you would call it yourself aloud. So you would catch the catch 1, inside circle 2, inside circle 3, inside circle 4, inside circle 5.5, that's your transition, and then we counting the catches. Different people do it different ways, but I always count the catches because that's the end point of the movement. And then the hand transition is just beyond that. But you don't get 4.5, you get 5 full, and then hand transition. Count the stops. The transition doesn't count, but you can call it aloud so that you know that you need to do it. It tends to be a half circle. Somebody's telling me about Patreon. Patreon pledge an amount per production, like video or article. Yeah. Great way to keep much of your work accessible to the poor and the hapless. The goal is always to make it as free as possible so that people can learn. I just wish people had done it for me, so I didn't spend $80,000 learning all this stuff, but if I can pass it on to people from my version of the economic spectrum, I think that that's excellent, and that's how it should be done. Somebody asked about wrapping an 8X club handle to try to make it thicker. And now Ben Semish is commenting to wrap it in hockey tape. Yes, you can do things like that if you want to increase the thickness of the handle of your club, but it tends to eat up your hands when the edges of the tape start to roll. So you'll probably have to change the tape regularly. The second it starts to roll, you're going to have to replace it. For the most part, I don't like doing that myself, but it is an option that does work for people. There are also barbell grip thickeners. I'm not sure what they're called, but they go on Olympic barbells, and they are, God, what are they called? They're a circle of heavy rubber with a slice on one side and a hole in the middle, so you can wrap it around the barbell to increase the diameter of the bar. A lot of guys do that. The bigger around something is, usually the harder it is to grip. I think that that's not true in all cases. I think about up to 1.7. I think it might get easier, not harder. But people also use those on clubs, or they will put one over the hand, and as long as they hold tight and the ball at the bottom keeps it from sliding off in the tractionary grip. But you do have to be careful with something like that, because anytime you modify something like that, you introduce a variable which was not designed for, and so you're going to have to be smarter than the exercise and smarter than the weight when you're doing something like that. Oh God, Gold the Cat, common. He is a common commentator. Commentor. Don't know if you've spoken on this before, but thoughts on air bikes like the Assault or the Echo bike. Would you go air bike or bike for layman's cardio? I would never tell somebody to voluntarily get on an air bike. I do it because my coach makes me do it. They have them in CrossFit because they are evil. They are evil. And the point of CrossFit oftentimes is to design evil into a program to make people want to die. People will argue with me about that, but that is the point of a lot of CrossFit, is to be as savage as humanly possible. I would never tell somebody to ride an air bike or buy an air bike voluntarily unless they really had an athletic need for it in programming, where they needed savage kickers inside of other things. I know a lot of guys who do competitive shooting sports will do something like air bike because they can drag it out to a range. Whoop, smacking my gimbal there. And they can get a heart rate that's absolutely brutal in 30 minutes, and then they can do focus training drills where they have a super high heart rate and they have to figure out how to control their breathing for steady state stuff. For the most part, I would not. I've never owned an air bike. I've owned mountain climbers, I've owned ski ergs, I've owned rowers, but you will not find an air bike anywhere near me if I can help it. I do know a lot of triathletes use them because they can control max speed and they have a watt output screen on them, so they can make sure they are pedaling at the correct level of difficulty. They're outputting the correct amount of power. When people are training for, say, specific types of hill climbs in races, I'm not going to do that to you guys. I just can't recommend it. They're expensive. And I think if you just bought a real bike for the same amount of money that you bought an air bike for, your life would be better, not worse. I do think air bikes make people not happy at all in any way. So the amount of money you spend on an assault bike, just go buy a rock hopper and just go ride every day instead. There's very few places that are not fun to ride. Where I'm from in the Midwest, it's not fun to ride, but I still ride as opposed to doing air assault bikes. I'll go out and ride 10 miles of just pure dead flat farm road just because I'm out of the house and I'm breathing fresh air and I'm looking at the surroundings. Assault bikes are like things that go in caves that are, they're torture devices. They're truly torture devices. If you live in a city, go ride a bike. Go ride every street and every alley in your city. Build a specific distance and try to go faster next time. Try to figure out how to time lights. Figure out how to downshift, so when you're approaching lights, you don't come to a stop, but you keep your wheels turning so that when the light hits green, you can slam on it and go. If you live in the country at some place that's less flat than where I'm currently at, then ride any off-road place. Get a mountain bike. It doesn't have to be a good one. The original good mountain bikes from the 1990 were worse than the shittiest mountain bikes you're going to buy today. Even the mountain bikes at Walmart now are decent enough to ride on dirt track or gravel trail, no problem. As long as you're not trying to do downhill on them, you're going to be fine. So yes, please buy a real bike. Buy a real bike. It's the one thing I don't like in all of modern fitness training. Like, I can find a reason for everything accept assault bike unless my triathlete friends are going to make me do it. But then I do not like them at the end of it, which is probably the point. But I've just, no, not a fan of the assault bike in any way. I will row all day. I will do mace all day. I will do ski erg all day. I do not like those things. Yeah. Somebody cut that out and make that a video, just how much I dislike assault bikes. Kettlebell exercises for Muay Thai, everything. Once again, same thing, Muay Thai. I would probably lead you towards all your basic training and then lead you into something like long cycle, heavy long cycle, and then there are some really good, God, have I even made videos on these? I don't think I have. We used to call them a John Wick clean, John Wick press. It's a press where you rotate 180 degrees from a low kneeling position to the other side and then press from that compromised leg position. But it gets a turn into a press, and you can do both IPSA and contralateral with it. For the most part, work capacity would be something like long cycle, because long cycle has the calf explosion movement in it, and Muay Thai guys, you're calf monsters, and you're looking for that calf explosion power. So at the basic level, clean and press, and then moving beyond that, something like snatches for the pure insane heart rate demands of Muay Thai, then moving towards something like long cycle, then moving towards something like stepping pattern cleans to presses. Yeah, Muay Thai is wicked. Once again, a martial art that I am just in awe of. Those guys are psychos. Psychos. I mean, the amount of pain that they put up with and the amount of intensity that those guys bring to training is crazy. The only other people I know who bring that much intensity to training for martial arts are like Krav Maga guys. But Muay Thai guys are a more refined style to deal with a sport situation, which does translate very well to self-defense situations, obviously. But like Krav Maga guys are the only guys I know who approach that level of intensity in training, because Krav Maga guys are, once again, specifically trying to make the drills as hard as possible physically for the mental preparation of it. Just do a podcast episode, the Art of the Move podcast. I don't think I'm quite a good enough a mover to have something called the Art of the Move. You could call it Mark's Bell. Writing a kettlebell arc volume program. This is from Littlewood G1. Is writing a kettlebell arc volume program, snatch for kettlebell, with which single arc exercise can you recommend? I would do, if you're doing the arc exercises, I would do all of the super wide grip inside circles and outside circles. And the arc wide grip shield cast. When you think about kettlebell, think about front to back. So everything in arc that you'd want to train, you would want to train laterally, left to right, because you would be creating more movement than you need in the snatch, more rotation and counter rotation at a much lower weight. And just by doing the various hand position, you're not going to frack out your hands from snatch training, because snatch training is absolutely savage when you really get into like high rep hard stuff. Yeah, guys, please don't send me an air bike. No, nobody send me an air bike. Send me a real bike. Anything, not an air bike. Somebody, I don't know what the people are talking about something here. Yeah, people, just so you guys know, people who do end up doing lots of kettlebells and clubs and stuff, you are going to have to start wearing athletic cut pants. Like, I can only wear like a couple of pairs of commercial pants off the rack. The ones that I wear all the time now are the 511 Defender Flex Slim. I think they got rid of the Slim though. They don't have them in the new in the new catalog, and they don't have them in the shop. I think I have more of a straight leg one now, which is what I'm wearing, which I don't like nearly as much. But the Defender Flex Slim is meant for like people who work out. They're designed for military and law enforcement guys to look, basically like normal pants. They have extra belt loops on them, which is super clutch because it actually keeps your pants in place when you're doing stuff and moving, as opposed to just like the classic 5 belt loop thing on Levi's. I had some barbell denim ones that were like designed and made by CrossFitters. Absolutely hated them. They were $200, not worth it in any way. What are some other good ones? I have some really good Carhartt double knee pants that finally have a gusset in them, which are also very great. But for the most part, you're not going to be able to wear normal pants off the shelf. Like I went into a Levi's store and it was a nightmare. I think they did start to make an athletic pair. I bought, because people were making fun of me on a movie because I didn't have any like normal clothes. I only wore black all the time. So I bought a pair of these Levi's athletic cut jeans, maybe 552s or 562s or something like that. And even those, they just don't fit right for the shape of a kettlebeller's leg, or at least not for my leg. The 511s all work very well, but you might have to tailor the bottom of the leg if they look dorky. They have a lot of dorky lower leg design. Their upper leg design is very good, but their lower leg design is a little whack. How to unlock stubborn ankles with mobility issues. This is one that comes up a lot. Point your feet straight ahead, single arm clubbing and 2-hand clubbing. And then you will go back in. So first things first, you have to make them work normally first. If you're turned out and you have bad ankles, first thing, point your feet straight ahead and start doing lateral weight swinging, 100%. Because it's going to start to rotate your ankle joint the way that it's actually supposed to move in a limited range of movement. Usually go up in weight, at least 3 weights, run through all your basics with that. And then you can start standing on an incline, a very small incline, elevating the toe edge of the foot up an inch or whatever, and then repeating all the training again. So the ankles would go from that flat position into that position, and then once again start introducing the movement and the shifting done from single arm club swinging. Every time you catch, you absorb with the ankle, you absorb with the arch of the foot. Every time you do an inside circle, there's like 4 movements in every one of those. And then eventually you stand on balance boards that rotate 360 degrees, and you repeat the whole thing over again. And that will solve almost everybody's ankle issues. I don't know of anybody that wouldn't solve the primary version of their ankle issue. But that's for like normal people life. If you're a ballerina, then you would need to do that and do footwork or something. But most people aren't ballerinas, so probably not useful. That was for Patrick Smith, unlocking stubborn ankles. Challenging fate. Hi, Mark. I didn't realize how technical the kettlebell was. Is it worth it to try to continue to learn how to use it on my own? Can't afford an instructor, not located in the U.S. Absolutely. Absolutely. I learned it on my own. I learned it on my own originally just from watching videos. I got originally, it was, I don't know, maybe 2005. I was already a fitness instructor working at a normal gym, and I also already did martial arts and taught martial arts and everything. But you can totally learn kettlebell on your own. I bought myself, it was a Perform Better Cast 24K, had this monstrously thick handle on it, and the handle edges were crap. I had to sand the shit out of them to make them usable, but I didn't know that back then, which is why I harp on handles all the time now. And it used to just eat my hand up. But yeah, you can totally learn on your own. That's why I put out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos, is because if you just start with swings, start with 2-handed deadlift, go to 2-handed swings, go to hand swings, you're already gonna have the foundation of everything you need. Then you need to build your clean. You build your clean by picking it up with 2 hands, getting it to position, adjusting the kettlebell till it's in the correct handle spot, and then putting it down with 1 arm with your thumb pointed back. Pick it up with 2 hands. do it again. Until you figure out how to do the negative, get from your 45-degree angle down to your catch position, right where all your calluses are, getting bad, and then pick it up with two hands. And then you start building your clean and press. You can absolutely learn kettlebells on your own, 100%, and you definitely should. I used to just watch random videos of people and break it down like frame by frame. What were they doing? Did I think it was right? Did it line up with stuff that I read online? Because people used to do all of this as written instruction back when I started back in 2005, and it was like Dragon Door Forum and all that other stuff, and people would discuss ways of doing things and how to learn. The thing that I harp on the most is the catch, because that was the thing that was not really explained to me. Even in RKC, it wasn't as explained the same way because they use hard style bells. The first person to really explain grip to me was Valery Fedorenko when I went to a bunch of his seminars, and he was super specific about grip. Now, I do something in between a hard style grip and in between like a Fedorenko grip because I also do clubs and everything else. So I have this weird amalgamation technique between soft style and hard style and everything else. And that's fine. If you're not hurting yourself and you're going up in weight and you're holding on to it for longer periods of time, then you're definitely moving in the right direction. I write programs so that people have a path, right? There's a swing program we put out, which is years long. It's meant so you can just work on swings for years and get all the benefits of doing swings, which is all of your deadlift benefits. And you can get them, and it just progresses and it changes a little bit every day so that the workouts aren't the same, so you can go up, so you can learn. Learning is a culmination of lots of experimentation. This is the biochemical engineer in me coming through. The more you repeat an experiment, the more data points you have, the better your overall outcome will be. So can you learn on your own? 100%. You just run more experiments and you will eventually get there. It's impossible not to learn if you just run 10,000 experiments. You will learn something. Let's do just one or two more of these real quick, guys. And then I have to go actually shoot some videos here because I am behind. I don't even have my video for tomorrow done yet. I lost my shooting location yesterday, and so I was going to shoot like 5, and they didn't get done because I got booted. Ed the worst. If I only have 5 days a week to work out, 2 days kettlebell, other 3 days clubs, do you recommend 2 days on one-hand club and 2 days on two-hand club? I play badminton 2 other days and I rest 1 day. Which one should I prioritize? Run a cycle. If badminton, you probably be wanting to run single arm club because it's the thing that's most likely to be most specific to your sport. Run a cycle of two-hand club, then run a cycle of single arm club, run a volume cycle, jump to two-hand club, run a level, go back to single arm club, run a level, go back to two-hand club, run a level in different months. So whenever the end of that cycle stops, keep your kettlebells the same because kettlebells are easy, and then jump back and forth between two-handed club and single-hand club for different months or different phases of training. That way you get the benefit of doing all of them and you'll get a break from doing each one. You do your single arm, you run to the edge of the cycle, it gets really hard, jump to two-handed club, change your patterns, go back to doing global patterns, run a cycle, go back to doing single arm club. Anybody who plays a racket sport or a club sport should definitely be running single arm club of some point in any way. Anybody who does any single arm sport. Because it will balance you out. Badminton guys are like tennis guys. They rotate great one way, they rotate terrible the other way. Over time, they tend to get really good at one thing, but then that tends to limit them in other things that they want to do because they adapt so much to their racket-based sport that eventually you absolutely have to do single arm club to start to counteract that hyper hyper specialization. Dan Haller. First time actually making one of your lives. Just wanted to say appreciate your instruction. You're welcome, sir. The goal is for everybody to learn. 22-year-old cancer survivor in remission since February. Your heavy club program helped me get through chemo. Boom. Thank you. Yes, this is the point. Provide people who, if you're going through chemo or if you're limited on where you can go or where you're allowed to be for whatever reasons, the goal is to provide programs that people can really benefit from that will cycle all of the internal organs of the body, right? So we have movement patterns. We don't talk about this a lot because we tend to talk about movement patterns, but things like kettlebelling and club do meet all of the movement pattern requirements and loading requirements of exercising your internal organs, as you would think of in Chinese traditional medicine. Lung movements, kidney movements, all of the different movements are built in that you would find in some traditional health practices, and those movements categorized by what organ they are meant to be affecting by the changing shape of your rib cage and of your core structure. Is supposed to be moving around fluids and stuff in that part of your body. So whether or not you do it for health purposes, whether or not you do it for recovery purposes or athletic purposes, it warms my heart to hear that people have been using this stuff in a way that helps them recover from life, right? Life happens and we all got to get through it and we all got to recover. So thank you, Dan, for watching our videos and for doing your training, and congratulations on your remission, and keep going. Keep going, buddy. Good work. Excellent. Excellent. 22 years old. Makes me so happy. This is the broadest question I've seen in a long time. This is from Hi You. They want to use a water bag, kettlebell, club, mace, all for mostly cardio. How do you do that? It's like a billion ways to answer that question. Here's an idea. Pick the kettlebell up. Don't put it down for 20 minutes. Pick the mace up. Don't put it down for 20 minutes. Pick the club up. Don't put it down for 20 minutes. Pick up the water bag. Don't put it down for 20 minutes. And then build your core basic 6 movements and then build out in complexity for there. There's an infinite number of ways to answer that question. It's such a broad question. It's comical. But yes, you want to do cardio, don't put it down. You want to do more towards strength, then you go with heavier weights. I tend to lead people somewhere in the middle of that, strength and cardio, with all the programs that we do, build up people's strength so that they can survive cardio. Most people are simply not strong enough to survive cardio. But yeah, you can do mace in infinite number of ways for 20 minutes. Go for an hour, kettlebells, any type of kettlebelling for 10 minutes without putting it down. Just doing kettlebell cleans for 10 minutes or kettlebell swings for 10 minutes is savage cardio, right? One of the most hardcore cardio things that you can do outside of something annoying like an assault bike is 10 minutes of kettlebell snatches, right? Do 220 snatches in 10 minutes. Guess what? Cardio. You want to do more cardio? Go for 20 minutes. Do 440. You want to do more than that? Do 660 in 30 minutes. Cardio. Done. Infinite number of ways to answer that question. We have a ton of programs, videos about that in my personal program where I talk about program design for marathon and half marathon kettlebell times. One of the ideas that we do is do an exercise for a minute with one side, repeat it on the other side, add a level of complexity, add a level of complexity, add, until your movement keeps getting more and more complex. You have something to do. Because you're changing the complexity, your muscles won't be tired in the same way. Your breathing pattern will change. It's cardio. Do the same thing with mace, do the same thing with club. Daniel Wade, people kettlebell daily? I do. I kettlebell twice a day. He exhausted his triceps within a 20-minute session after months of bi-tri weekly sessions. wondering about muscular endurance. Yeah, gym stuff is not the same as real stuff. If you're doing, man, this thing is bouncing. What's going on here? Do we have a wind? Wind. You guys are gonna have to put up with the bounce camera for a second. Wind stopped. Buys and tries at the gym are not the same as holding on to things or putting things overhead. They're not even close. Buys and tries workouts tend to be done with heavier weights with lower sets. So, you'll be at the gym and you'll do 3 exercises that are, 4 sets of 8. And you're working on lifting for that 8 reps, basic bodybuilding idea. And then you have your long break in the middle. The way that your cells adapt to that is different on every level than adapting to something like kettlebells. Kettlebells, your cells are learning to recover under load, entirely different. Physiologically, inside your body, they are different things. So there are a lot of guys out there who have just awesome buys and tries, but doing jerks for 4 minutes will make them so sore that they can't move their arm. They are different types of training. They're just different. So yeah, if you want to start converting over towards kettlebells, it is the process that most people have who are gym guys, is the process of them building cellular endurance. Not always just cardio endurance, because a lot of guys who go to the gym, they do their weights and they do their 20 to 30 minutes of cardio and their heart's in good shape. But lifting weights nonstop is an entirely different thing, and you do need to train for it in a different specific way. People go through swings, go through swing programs, building up their hamstring endurance first, because that's the one that's easiest. Then they go to hand, they start integrating that long-term core endurance. Then they build into clean and press. Clean and press starts to get the movement pattern of the overhead press, tricep endurance. But every time you're doing this, you're having grip, which is bicep endurance, but it's a long line bicep instead of short line bicep, because your bicep is being contracted in the long position at the bottom of the swing. But yeah, you can eventually kettlebell 5-6 days a week. Those guys are monsters. Like I still consider myself an intermediate kettlebell guy, because I got diverted in hardstyle for way too long. Because that's what we were all told to practice when you were hardstyle practitioners. You were very much leaned away from doing any type of the endurance stuff. But it's become much more popular recently with the advent of Instagram. People can really see the benefits of it. I tended not to use it a lot for many years because I did the endurance part of training with club training. Same thing. If you're not used to single arm club training and you're running your volume cycles and density cycles, once again, you're going to fry out your triceps and your biceps in the beginning. People, when they first start learning shield casts, tend to get a lot of soreness in the upper part of their tricep because they're just not used to doing that much tricep work in that amount of time. But yeah, I got diverted into hardstyle for the most part because it's the fastest way to get the most benefit in the least amount of time, which is what I needed for clients for the most part. And then we did our endurance pieces by doing things like clubbing, single arm clubbing, because when you finish a volume cycle of mills, the fast way to do it is like 7 minutes and 10 seconds, and you're really flying at that point. You're very, very good. But you have to build up that endurance. It is different physiologically, and the guys who are the sport guys who've been doing kettlebell sport for 10 years are monsters. I don't know what their body is doing on the inside, but their ability to create tension and power for long periods of time is bonkers. It is superhuman. When you watch like the double long cycle guys or the double snatch guys, they're not, no normal gym guy, even the super strong ones, can keep up with the kettlebell guys. Kettlebelling and clubbing are the only ways I know to create the cellular and energy system change that happens with these guys. I don't know of any way to do it with barbells. I suppose you could do it with dumbbells. It's just dumbbells aren't meant to be lifted that way, so I think it would be really hard on people. If you were already a kettlebell guy, then you could do it with dumbbells, but I don't think it goes the other way. Here's somebody from Scotland. Keith Bott. Bott? B-O-T-T, Bott. From Motherwell, Scotland. I don't actually know where that one's at. Motherwell, Scotland. Any ideas how to Tetris in a complex line like armor building into my kettlebell and single arm club program? Yeah, I love the armor building complex. Somebody pointed it out to me, and I had read an article about it years ago by Dan John. And I'd put it aside because I was like working someplace and I only had one kettlebell instead of the two kettlebells. I'm gonna sneeze again. Yeah, good stuff. Armor building complex, what I've been doing with it, before I started doing these 10-minute nonstop cardio design programs that I've been working on, I was doing long cycle 2 days a week with a heavy light. And then I was doing armor building once a week, and then two-hand club twice a week, and then the other day was a single arm, not an armor building complex, but a single arm series like armor building complex. Can't remember what it was called. But yeah, armor building complex. Once again, I like it. I'm doing it as 20 to 30 minute sections right now. So an EMOM, armor building complex, for people who don't know, is 2 cleans, 1 hard style press, 3 front squats. So double kettlebells, so do 2 cleans, do 1 press, do 3 squats, set the weight down. I've been doing it as an EMOM, and started with like double 20s because I haven't done it in forever, and did 30 minutes, and then I went to like double 21s and did 30 minutes, and built up from 20 minutes to 30 minutes, add 2 minutes a time. I think I was on 23s or 24s when I stopped doing it, and then yeah, it's an incredible complex. It's so simple, and it's so easy to get a lot out of in a short period of time. And I was using it to counterbalance the double long cycle, because the double long cycle is not a pure press, it's a jerk, and there's no squat in it. There's a dip in it, but it's mostly hamstrings and calf. It's triple extension. So throwing in the armor building complex on an other day from long cycle, I thought was a fantastic idea, because it forces you to do your pure press and to do your front squats, and your front squats should be a building block towards your long cycle. Yeah, so that fun question, guys. That was a good one. Any plans to do kettlebell club events across the country? Yeah, I just don't have anywhere to do them. Right now, we just started with these staff club and mace seminars at FlowShala, because Summer owns FlowShala, so we can do whatever we want there. And I thought that would be the funnest one to do because staff is super fun, and I wanted to teach that. But if anybody has gyms or locations and you would like to do kettlebell or club events across the country, send me messages on Instagram or whatever, and let's set them up. I love to teach. The only thing I like doing is teaching. I'm kind of boring at everything else. I like to teach. I like to do weird adventure stuff. But yeah, if people have gyms or anything and they want to do events, that would be great. I just am not super familiar with gyms all around the country. So if somebody has a gym, or they know of a gym, or they know of a space, it doesn't even have to be a gym. CrossFit gyms tend to be pretty good because people are used to dropping stuff there and things going wrong and everything. But yeah, I'd love to do them. Let's do maybe one more because we're at 103 minutes here. Curly Hair Artistry. Enjoyable name. What trainings impacted you as a trainer years ago? The most impactful training I ever did was RKC. I had already been a martial artist and a martial arts coach, and was already working as a trainer in Hollywood for several years at that point. I'd been a martial arts coach for 10 years or whatever at that point, because I started when I was like 16, with small teaching and everything like that, and building our way up. But the most impactful one ever was RKC back in the day when it was run by Pavel. I think my first one was 2005 or 2006. Don't remember. It was a long time ago. But that one, I was like, oh, this is how real fitness training should be done. It wasn't academic. Like all the other normal training stuff was like memorize these facts and figures and then repeat them on a paper test. There was no like in-person requirement for coaching. Nobody worked with you on your coaching. So RKC, it's 6 exercises done in 3 days. The whole first part of the first day is just swings. You do swings for 4 hours. And they break it down and they have you do drills and they do it again. They have you do this, they have you do workouts. They beat it into you so that you could not possibly do it wrong. There was no way that anybody was getting out of that room without a good swing and a good ability to teach it. And then they went into Turkish Get Up and they just broke it down and ripped it apart and hammered it over and over and over again. We didn't work much on coaching with that, but it was everybody who left that room knew their basic 6 of kettlebelling. They knew it, and they were probably going to be able to implement it and be more effective than any other coach out there. So RKC was the first most impactful one that I went to. After that, I was trying to learn Chinese golden melon hammers, which is not easy to learn. And I was looking for ways to learn that, and I stumbled across heavy club swinging. And I got into heavy club swinging, and I took the CST, I don't know how many times, a lot. And that seminar changed a lot over time. They really changed, more ghetto birds, changed the focus of that training over and over and over again. Like every year that thing ended up different, and sometimes it got better and sometimes it got worse. Sometimes it got easier communicated, sometimes it got less good communicated. But that one was really influential just because the core idea of weight swinging was so much more emphasized there. RKC and CST in the day hated each other, and you would never find somebody who was doing both of them for the most part, because they were just absolutely thought that they were the most correct person and the most correct strategy, and they weren't willing to listen to each other in any way at all. So I ended up using both of those kind of ideas and slamming them together and be like, what if we Bruce Lee'd it and took the best out of both ideas? And then, Fedorenko, I took Fedorenko's trainings, which were not as concisely designed as something like RKC was. But once again, the idea is good. Like, what is the real point of kettlebelling? The real point of kettlebelling is endurance. You can use it for strength. You can use it for basic movement patterns. But eventually that stuff, you'll run into the end of that idea, and eventually you should work on endurance as well. Some other really good trainings I took, this one's gonna be outsider, and if you're from Europe or something and you don't like this topic, sorry, it's part of learning. Firearms seminars. I've taken, I don't know, a lot of tactical firearms training so that you know what you're talking about in relation to film, TV, and movie. And in relation to martial arts and modern martial arts. So I took a class from what I consider to be one of the greatest instructors I have ever seen, James Yeager. James Yeager runs a school in Camden, Tennessee. It's called Tactical Response, and it's not shooting guns, it's gun fighting technique. And that guy had his seminar down. I mean, he altered the structure of your brain when he taught you. I was like, this is what everybody's trying to do. So a lot of the learning stuff that I do, I pulled directly from tactical firearms instruction, and the way that I teach people and stuff like that. The end goal, the great thing about those seminars was they were highly focused on the end goal, getting people to be competent. Once again, nobody got out of that room without knowing exactly what they were doing and why. That was one of the greatest seminars I ever took, and I took a lot of that guy's seminars because I was just amazed at his coaching technique and his learning technique. It's the same type of learning technique that you would use for people with like brain injuries and all these other things. Like, I don't know if he's marketing it that way or if that's what he's thinking, but that's what I see after having lived on an equestrian therapy horse farm. So I take all these seminars, RKC, CST, TACFit, CrossFit, all these other things, and you slam them all together and you kind of get me out of that mix. And then you throw in things like Krav Maga instructor training, Kung Fu instructor training, and all these other ideas, and you slam them all together. But RKC was probably the most impactful one ever because it was the best communicated in the least amount of time. CST went up and down in quality for years as they just got off message and all kinds of other things, but it was still very good. And then James Yeager, that guy is one of the greatest coaches who I think has ever lived. I mean, the guy, I was shocked by how much he altered the structure of my brain and the way I thought by the end of his seminar. It was absolutely incredible. That guy is not doing well right now. He has a lot of health issues and he's probably not going to make it. So I feel very, very privileged. He's not going to make it long. He has a terminal thing. But that guy was probably one of the greater influences in my life on coaching. Another coach I really love, what I've only ever seen his YouTube stuff, but I absolutely love the way he thinks, is Dave Canterbury of Self-Reliance Outfitters and the Pathfinder School. And hopefully this fall, because I'm going to actually be on that side of the planet for fall for the first time in God knows how long, I am making it a point to go to a bunch of his trainings as well, because I think that guy also teaches just incredibly. So there's a lot of instructors that I love. And there's a lot of teaching styles that I love, and I try to pull from all of them because that's how you should learn. You got to learn and teach in order to know what you're talking about. SoCal Kettlebell Fest runs events every few months. I don't know what that's about, but I'm going to look that up. Have I seen Scott Sonnen's kettlebell DVDs? Yeah, I have. I also took his kettlebell seminar once. It was interesting. I don't think it was the best kettlebell seminar I'd ever taken. It was stacked after a TACFIT seminar, so I think everybody was tired. But I don't think that it was as well organized as I would expect from a coach like Sonnen. Sonnen's a very detailed coach. I don't think his kettlebell seminar was as refined as it should have been. I've seen his DVDs and stuff. He's somewhere in the middle once again. Sonnen was a guy who comes from a school of like Systema training, ultra efficiency training out of several different types of Russian schools. So I don't know. He was really much more into the hyper efficient lightweight stuff, but I think he could have benefited more from a little bit more hard style stuff. Because, intro clubbing is really hard style clubbing if you think about it. So I think that his kettlebell stuff it's very interesting. He's got a lot of very cool stuff, but I don't think it's presented the way that it should be to communicate the information effectively. Kurt Melby says that a 16K was too heavy for him to start because he's only ever run and never lifted. Yeah, that is going to be an issue. So you're going to have to, 16K is not so heavy that it's unwieldable, but you can get to a kettlebell racked position with two hands and you can do a push press to get to the top, and you can hold for 10 seconds and you can come down. There's a lot of ways to do it. The point is you can start with a 16K. Not that it's perfect for everybody. The best thing you could do would be to buy a competition adjustable kettlebell that starts at 12K. I'm going to harp on that forever. It is the best use of everybody's money. That way they can start lighter if they've only ever run and they don't have any lifting structure of any type. They could start at a 12K and build their way up. So 16K doesn't work for everybody. There are outliers out there. 16K is also too light for most people. 16K is an average answer, not knowing everybody's situation. So yes, if you've only ever run, then you probably might need a lighter weight to start. But you can get away with a 16K. You're just going to have to do one rep at a time and set it down and turn it into pure strength training. Kurt does have an adjustable kettlebell now, though, so good. Yes, Clint Engel says that James Yeager was recently diagnosed with ALS. That is correct. The guy is an incredible instructor, and if you have a chance, go meet that guy before ALS takes him away from us, because that guy is a freaking genius when it comes to his topics and his ability to put forth knowledge. Like one of the things that I've modeled my YouTube stuff off after is him. He made a video every day for 3 years, good, bad, and different. He just made a video. And he ended up talking about a lot of stuff that otherwise wasn't being talked about, like, you know, different gear things, what's good, what's bad. And it's like all these other little things. And I strive to do that. I did, I think, 1.5 years before I started to really break down, and I had to go down to 5 days a week, and now I'm back up to 6 days a week. But putting out the content so that people can get into the ideas, and you talk about things that you wouldn't normally talk about in instruction, like the shape of a kettlebell handle, or like how you store it, or rolling it up with a yoga mat and putting it in the back of your car. All these little things that are little pieces of knowledge that somebody who works with something and masters something puts forth. That is the information that Yeager started putting out into the world for things like tactical firearms training that nobody else was doing at that time. So he really led a lot of change in a lot of ways, and the way that people think about firearms training in context with modern martial arts and self-defense training. The guy really changed the game. The guy changed the game. All right, guys, we're at 115 minutes here. We're almost 2 hours. I got to stop doing so much time here. It's killing me. My camera person standing here staring at me, waiting for me to go shoot videos. So thank you very much. Thank you for the questions. Continue to ask questions. A lot of the questions have similar answers, and that's fine. Every time they are placed into a different context, we will endeavor to explain why that answer applies to this context so that everybody can learn together, so that we can all become better. The goal is to make myself obsolete, and all of you could go out and just train people or train yourself and have the best information possible, because the world is really falling into bad health very, very, very quickly. And it's really getting out of control, and that's going to raise the cost of living. It's going to make society untenable. The easiest thing that we can all do is be effectively in shape for the least amount of money so that the whole civilization can continue to go on. We can all go on, and we can all continue to do what we want to do in life. So, everybody, thank you very much. Have a good day, and go lift something.